Welcome back everyone to part 7 of my blue Honda 3-wheeler conversion bike build series. Over the last 6 videos, we took this rusted out junkyard gem, we got the engine unstuck, and we got what was left of it running again. Then after that, I went to town on a rusted out and cracked up frame with the Sawzall and got to building some custom body panels out of fiberglass. And now this week, it's time for some paint and body work. So let's do this. The fiberglass side panels I made in the last video had a few air bubbles here and there, so I'm just filling in the holes with some Bondo before I move on to primer. While the Bondo is setting up, let's move on to sanding up the rear fender. Now this guy started out as a cracked up front fender off of a 1981 ATC 110 3-wheeler, and I figured since it was pretty damaged, it'd work perfectly if I just flip it 180 and do a little chopping on it to fit the frame. The fender had a few holes in it from the factory to hold the brake cable guide and mud flap together, and since I'm not using either of those on the rear, I cut a few round plugs out of the leftover scrap I had laying around, and I plastic welded the pieces in place on the underside of the fender. After everything cooled down on the underside, I ran the iron along the top side of the plug to melt the rest of it together, and I did the best I could to smooth the goo out as much as possible. And after the top side all cooled down, I sanded everything smooth with some 120 grit sandpaper and moved on to filling up the mud flap holes using the same technique. And it turned out pretty slick because you're going to see pretty soon that the holes are completely gone once I lay down some primer. Nice, that's going to work out great. I'll leave a link to the previous videos of this build series in the comments below, just in case you missed out on them and want to catch up on the rest of the build. Now let's spray everything down with some plastic adhesion promoter and some epoxy primer. I use a light dusting of epoxy primer on the fenders for the first coat because it seems to stick pretty darn good to the old ATC plastics. However, we need to use a couple coats of 2K urethane primer after that so we can get a layer built up high enough so we can sand out the rough 120 grit sandpaper marks we left in the plastic.
Holy cow, what did you guys get, huh? Holy cow. Have to get more of that, huh? Hey, Cow, what do you got going on over here? What is that? Ah, so that's how it is in your family.
Now that the primer is set up, I'm dusting everything with a little black guide coat. Now, this guide coat gives you a reference point when you're sanding your primer. Now the goal is to sand off all the black without breaking through the 2K primer into the epoxy primer below. And for example, if you see any black halos around your body filler or see any sanding marks, you know you got low spots and you need to keep block sanding. Now just be extra careful when you're sanding that you don't sand down too far and break down into the plastic, because then you're going to have to lay down another coat of primer like I did. Ah well, you'll see in a couple minutes that the end result was well worth the second effort. Let's make this bike blue, dude. I had the paint shop mix me up some single-stage Nogaro blue that came on the early 2000 Audi S4s, for example. It's a really slick color and it has a ton of blue mica pearls in it that really, really sparkle in the sun. And we're going to get to check that out really soon, so hold tight. I really need to figure out a better system of spraying small parts like this. The wind was blowing like 1,000,000 miles an hour that day, and it was an absolute catastrophe getting this stuff sprayed. But it actually turned out really, really nice in the end. You'll see. Yeah, buddy, look at those blue pearls sparkle in the sun. Now let's move on to the tank. This guy looks like it came off of a 1978 ATC 90, and it was a little dented and had some surface rust on it, but the inside looked great, and the outside is nothing we can't fix. So let's go to town on it with the trusty dusty Harbor Freight angle grinder and a Scotch-Brite pad. And while I'm working here, I'm really genuinely curious to hear what projects you all got going on. So if you want, let me know in the comments below what you're working on, be it bikes, cars, trucks, snowmobiles, tractors, whatever. I'd love to hear from you and love to hear some good stories and chat. Before I lay down the body filler, I'm going to rough up the metal with a cutoff wheel so the filler is going to have some really good teeth to grip to. I guess, as an added bonus, sparks make for great YouTube content. Now I'm mixing up some tiger hair fiberglass filler so I can skim it over the dented areas of the tank. Now this stuff's going to hold up to any stresses a lot better than your run-of-the-mill Bondo will. It's a pain in the butt to sand, but I've had really good luck with the stuff from the past. Now that the tiger hair is sanded smooth, I'm going to mix up a little Bondo and give the entire tank a skim coat so I can sand out any little imperfections that I missed with the fiberglass. Now we're getting somewhere. Just a little sanding on the filler for a bit, and then I'm going to lay down a couple layers of primer and block sand the entire thing to perfection before I paint. Man, I'm in love with this blue paint. It's definitely time to make some custom decals for this thing, but that's going to have to wait for next week. So please click the video on the left if you want to catch up on the earlier videos of this build, or you can click on the right if you want to check out another one of my awesome builds. See y'all next week.